Hello and welcome everyone to the annual Alzheimer's Research UK and the UEA public event. My name is Dr. Sava Sami. I'll be hosting this event. I'm a senior lecturer in dementia research at the University of East Anglia. In this forum, we'll be speaking about the latest research initiatives and developments in dementia research, and much of it has been impacted, of course, during the COVID-19 pandemic. So we're going to start shortly as people arrive. We'll wait just a couple of minutes and we'll start just in a few minutes' time. All right, thank you. I think we're ready to start. Okay. So welcome once more for those who've just arrived to our annual Alzheimer's Research UK and UEA public event. As I said, my name is Dr. Sava Sami, Senior Lecturer in Dementia Research at the University of East Anglia, hosting this event. And we'll be speaking about the latest research initiatives and developments in dementia research, which of course much of it has been impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. In our lineup today for today's event, we have an excellent set of speakers, and I'll just get the program up and running for you here so that you can see who we've got. So next slide, please. Yes. So today we're going to start with Hilary Evans, Chief Executive of Alzheimer's Research UK, speaking about maintaining momentum in dementia research, COVID-19 and beyond. After that, we have Professor Miia Kivipelto from the Karolinska Institute in Sweden. She's going to speak about prevention of cognitive impairment and dementia. Is it possible? So we're talking about the latest and exciting findings from the finger study trials, which we're all very excited to hear about. And last but not least, Professor Hanne Mette from Aalborg University in Denmark, talking about online and live connection through music therapy. Next slide, please. For today's meeting, we will have a live and interactive process, so you can actually interact with us. So please click on the chat in the meeting control toolbar, and you can send us your comments there. Next slide, please. And you can also send, of course, anonymous questions anonymously if you don't want to have your name shown. And the panelists will answer most of the questions live after the Q&As, the initial talks. Okay. You will also have the possibility to raise your hand and unmute to ask a question live. To do that, here are the instructions on the screen. Yes. And this will be in the roundtable discussion in the end, which we will have. And last but not least, we have the next slide just to show you that we also have a connected meeting at the 24th of September, our next Dementia Open Forum meeting, which will be presented by Dr. Naoko Kishita on the web-based acceptance and commitment therapy to support family carers of people with dementia. So that's the upcoming event on the 24th of September. So now I have the great pleasure of presenting Hilary Evans, Chief Executive of Alzheimer's Research UK. Hilary?
Good afternoon.
Yeah, hello. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Well, firstly, thank you for inviting me to speak to all of you this afternoon. It's lovely to see so many people zooming in to hear from this panel and to be part of this live event. I wanted to talk to you about how, as an organisation, Alzheimer's Research UK are maintaining the momentum that's needed in dementia research. So talk to you a little bit as supporters of Alzheimer's Research UK and people interested in dementia research, what the last 18 months or so has really meant to us as an organisation, as a research funder, and then touch on some of the priority areas of research for us. So the past year has seen challenges, I think, for everyone. And the pandemic has touched many, many lives, particularly people affected by dementia. So we know that 1 in 4 people who died with COVID-19 had dementia. And that rates of diagnosis of dementia have dropped off in the past year as fewer people are coming forward to seek a diagnosis or talk to their doctors. Dementia is one of the biggest health challenges that we face, and the pandemic has only served to highlight the urgency with which we must tackle it. So here at Alzheimer's Research UK, we've been working hard to continue our work despite the impact of this pandemic. In March of last year, experiments were wound down, research labs were shut, some of our clinical studies were paused. The dementia researchers that we support began working from home, and while they weren't able to generate new data, they focused on analysing the data that they had, writing research papers about their discoveries, and planning and prioritising their return. They were able to return to labs as restrictions eased over last summer, and labs have mostly remained open during the more recent lockdowns. However, due to social distancing, researchers are working on rota systems, meaning that the pace of research is still not what it should or could have been. We had to take some tough decisions as a charity to pause award funding in the spring of 2020, while we work to protect the charity's finances and our existing funding commitments. We also had to furlough a number of our employees in roles who had been particularly impacted by restrictions. But over a year on, we have a clearer idea of how the pandemic has affected our work. Before the pandemic, Alzheimer's Research UK was growing at pace. And we now know that the pandemic has impacted the growth that we had been achieving in the recent years. However, things didn't turn out to be as bad as we predicted they could have been back in March 2020. And this really is to the credit and with thanks to the resilience of our supporters who stood by us, and to our employees who've innovated and adapted to how they've worked over the past year. And it's with thanks to our supporters that we've been able to reopen our funding schemes this year. In this spring, we have awarded funding to 6 new research fellows, and our grant review board met last month to decide on more new projects to support with our grants. We know that junior researchers have been particularly at risk over the last year, as they are most likely to be on short contracts and without permanent tenured positions. From surveying the dementia research community, we know that 1 in 3 dementia researchers have considered leaving research completely due to the impact of the pandemic. So it's vital that we continue to highlight the importance of increased funding for dementia research, which is still relatively underfunded compared to other conditions. So last month, we delivered our petition containing over 51,000 signatures to the UK Prime Minister, urging the government to keep their election promise to double dementia research funding. Now I'm going to move to talk about 3 key areas of our work here at Alzheimer's Research UK. So firstly, our work around brain health. So it's estimated that around 40% of dementia cases could be due to risk factors that are under our control, what we call modifiable risks. However, our work has shown that only 34% of people are aware that there are things that can be done to look after our brain health and help reduce the risk of dementia. This is why we created our Think Brain Health campaign earlier this year. We ran this campaign across social media, so you may have seen it. We want to make sure that people know that just as we can protect other areas of our health, we can take steps to look after our brain health. We've broken it down into 3 simple rules. Love your heart, stay sharp, and keep connected. You're likely to be aware of things that you can do to look after your heart, like keeping active, a balanced diet, stopping smoking, drinking responsibly, and keeping a watch of your blood pressure. And these are all things that are great ways to really show some love and look after your brain as well. Keeping mentally active can help build something called your cognitive reserve, which is your brain's ability to cope and keep working. A lot of people are keen to hear about the activities that are best to do, but the truth is there isn't yet enough evidence to suggest one specific activity that may be the most helpful in building your brain's resilience. So the key here is variety and doing things that you enjoy. So reading, learning a new language, taking up a new hobby, and much, much more. And the third part really is about staying socially active, as this can help ward off loneliness and is linked to an increased risk of dementia. And we've all experienced challenges around this in the past year or so. Not being able to see friends and family, but phone calls, video calls, and meeting with people where possible can really help keep that sense of connection and help look after your brain. So our message really is about small changes and doing things that you enjoy that'll help you keep these activities up in the longer term. I know we'll be hearing in a few minutes much more from Professor Miia later in this session. So I look forward to hearing about some of her fantastic research, as I'm sure you do. So the second area I want to talk about is early detection. So the second big area, I think, as a charity that we've been working on over the last 18 months is around how we can detect and diagnose dementia earlier. Currently, someone is diagnosed with Alzheimer's or another form of dementia only once symptoms like memory loss start to show. But we know that by this point, the disease is quite likely taken hold in the brain up to 2 decades earlier. Just like other conditions such as cancer, we stand the best chance of halting Alzheimer's if we can identify the early signs and intervene. While undetectable to the human eye, digital technology can pick up these subtle early changes in how we behave with our sleep, our speech, interactions, and movement. So our early detection of neurodegenerative diseases, or EDEN initiative, sets out just that. Our researchers are collecting vast amounts of health data, analysing it to identify what those digital fingerprints would be. They're developing wearable technology that can gather a range of information and indicate if someone is showing the signs that they may go on to develop dementia. These smartphones and watches would mean that in the future, you and your doctor would have the information about your risk of diseases like Alzheimer's, allowing you to make lifestyle changes or take part in research studies for new treatments. The ultimate vision is that you'd have an effective treatment option available to you. That means that you wouldn't go on to develop the symptoms that get in the way of your life. Which brings me to our third area of work, bringing about effective treatments. So currently, treatments available for people with dementia in the UK are limited to medicines that treat the symptoms of dementia, but there is change on the horizon. Last month, the FDA in the US approved a drug called aducanumab. This is for treatment for Alzheimer's disease, It's a landmark ruling, as it's the first new Alzheimer's drug in nearly 20 years, and the very first that works by tackling the disease itself rather than treating the symptoms. We don't know yet whether this drug will be approved in the UK or if it will have life-changing effects on people's quality of life in the long term, but it certainly paves the way for more new treatments to follow. Our work is helping to design some of these potential new treatments through our drug discovery institutes. In each of our 3 institutes, dedicated teams of biologists and chemists are working to identify promising leads and carry out early screening. They're embedded within universities, but with close links to pharmaceutical companies, meaning that once they've identified a strong drug candidate, they can rapidly pass it on to the next phase of development in those companies. Since they began just over 5 years ago, we've worked on over 60 potential drug targets and have partnered on 35 more projects with pharmaceutical companies and biotech companies. This means that there is a healthy pipeline of potential treatments in development, which should translate into more effective treatments, reaching people living with different forms of dementia. We also help people to participate in research studies through Join Dementia Research. This is helping to accelerate progress by making it quicker and easier for researchers to find volunteers to be in their research studies. We are also working in the policy space to ensure that once effective treatments have been identified in clinical trials, that we can reduce the time it takes for them to reach people with dementia who need them. And I'd just like to end today to highlight a few of the maybe positive things that we can learn from the past year and from the COVID-19 pandemic. So we've seen the success of the vaccine and the vaccine task force. So one of the things that we're looking to do is to try and replicate that way of thinking in the dementia space, injecting that sense of urgency for governments to act, for a real boost in terms of the funding for dementia research that's so desperately needed, but also to look at how we can speed up innovation in this area, how we can look at clinical trials, how we can look at the design of how we then potentially deliver new treatments to patients. So I do think there are things that we can learn in the medical research space that we've seen in the vaccine space. So I'm working closely with some of the individuals who were involved in the vaccine task force. So Damon Kate Bingham, who led the vaccine task force in the UK, has been working in the dementia space for a number of years with us as well. So it's good to have her expertise to see what we can translate from some of those recent successes in vaccines. So I'll end really, I guess, by just saying that these areas really are interlinked. So the three different areas that I've talked about really need to come together in order to make breakthroughs possible. We need to ensure that improving brain health will only help reduce the number of people affected by dementia. But we also need better ways to pinpoint people at the early stages of these diseases and to have effective treatment options for them that can slow or stop their disease. And these areas will continue to be priorities for Alzheimer's Research UK. And I hope in the coming years, we can, as an organisation, get back on the growth trajectory that we've been on. People with dementia need this organisation to deliver, and future generations will need us even more. So thank you for your time and look forward to being part of this panel this afternoon.
Thank you very much, Hilary, for this fantastic talk. We'll move on to the next speaker before we ask questions. So we'll ask the questions in the final round. Our next speaker is Professor Miia Kivipelto, and she will be giving us a talk about the FINGERS trials. Miia, over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the invitation. It's my great pleasure to be here today and talk about prevention of cognitive impairment and dementia. Is it possible? I will share some new findings from the FINGER trial and this exciting journey when FINGER has now been expanding to worldwide fingers. So first, we already heard about the challenge we are facing when we are talking about dementia, but I just want to remind us all about the numbers. Every 3 seconds, someone is developing dementia. We have today around 50 million persons with dementia, and 2050, the number is estimated to be 150 million. So we can really talk about dementia epidemic. And here, prevention has been highlighted as the key element if we want to manage this dementia epidemic globally. There are still some attitudes and I would say stigma around when we are talking about dementia. We heard already about that from Hilary earlier. Still, 2 in 3 people think that dementia is part of normal aging, and this includes healthcare professionals. 1 in 4 think that there is nothing we can do to prevent dementia. And I was very happy to hear about the initiative led by Alzheimer Research UK, this Think Brain Health, to really increase the awareness what people can do today. So what can we do? How much can we prevent dementia? We do not know exactly yet, but the most recent estimates are pointing that 40% of dementia is related to these 12 modifiable risk factors listed here. And I'm very happy to see that the list of risk factors have been growing during the last years. And of course, we still need to study more. The evidence level for these different risk factors is varying. For some of those is already strong. For others, we still need to have more studies. But you can see here these traditional vascular risk factors: diabetes, high blood pressure and obesity already at midlife, physical inactivity, depression, smoking, low education. And there are also these more novel risk factors like hearing loss, which has been getting quite a lot of interest, traumatic brain injury, high alcohol consumption, social isolation, and air pollution. So even these type of environmental risk factors. So there are several targets for the interventions. If we turn the discussion from risk factors to protective factors, what can we do to reduce the risk? Here we have the healthy, balanced diet. Education is very important, and in general, active lifestyle. All these 3 components are important: physical, mental, and social activities. I also think that this list is not yet final. We are doing a lot of research to try to find even more novel risk factors. As an example, it's not only depression, but already feelings of loneliness and hopelessness have been identified as risk factors for dementia. And especially now during the COVID pandemic and the lockdown, these factors have been having increasing importance and relevance, especially for many people, older people living alone. Even factors like stress and sleeping disturbances have been identified as possible risk factors for dementia. And we see these more and more at our memory clinic, where even younger persons have challenges with stress and sleep disturbances. So activity is good for the brain, but in our hectic societies, brain also needs some rest. So it's the balance between activity and rest. Impaired oral health is also one of these newer risk factors, and that could be linked to dementia through inflammation or less optimal diet. And then, of course, infections, especially COVID-19. There is intensive research going on to try to understand if COVID-19 infection can also increase the risk of cognitive impairment and even dementia during the longer time course. As mentioned, prevention has been really getting more attention. Prevention is the treatment we are having now. It's important to start early. And WHO launched the first risk reduction guidelines for dementia 2019. My team was involved very much in this work. And I think this is an important document because it provides the evidence base for the implementation strategies globally. We are just now working with updating these because, as mentioned, new evidence is really coming all the time. Then the question, what do we aim to prevent? We already heard that dementia is kind of the late stage of this long process starting in the brain, maybe 20 or even 30 years before we can do the dementia diagnosis, when these different kind of pathologies are accumulating. It can be amyloid and tau, these hallmark features in AD, or vascular and other type of these type of pathological features. And we are more and more focusing now, moving and starting the interventions for persons who have increased risk of dementia, not so much symptoms yet. This can be done using different tools like scanning of the brain or CSF. There is also a lot of hope for the blood-based biomarkers and even digital biomarkers, as mentioned. But we can also use different risk factors, identifying persons based on risk factors for dementia, which is maybe even easier if we are thinking the public health approach and GP level. It's also important to keep in mind that especially among older people, it's quite rare to have a pure Alzheimer pathology. Actually, only around 10 to 30% of cases have pure Alzheimer pathology. Most of the patients have actually mixed pathology. Quite often the vascular component is there especially. And giving this complex heterogeneous etiology of late life dementia, I think, and many researchers believe, that multi-domain prevention is really needed if we want to have an optimal preventive effect. What do I mean with the multi-domain interventions? I mean targeting several risk factors and mechanisms simultaneously. There have been several negative trials focusing only on one of the risk factors or one of the pathological mechanisms. But if we target them at the same time, there is more hope to get really clear evidence and effect for these interventions. So really trying to increase the positive factors and decrease the negative factors. And this, I think, is important when we want to now move on from these risk factors to clinical trials and sustainable implementation. So the multi-domain concept, I think, is really the key. The second important concept I would like to introduce is the brain plasticity. The modern neuroscience have been giving so much new evidence that the brain plasticity is there even when we are getting older. Everything what we are doing is affecting the structure and the function of the brain, and this gives the possibility for many lifestyle factors to really have this preventive effect. At the same time, we have now learned that one size does not fit all. We should try to optimize and tailor the interventions, taking into account the differences in the risk factors, because we all have different risk factor profiles. And also the risk factor and the importance of different risk factors may vary if we are at midlife or if we are older. Normally, I say that it's never too early to start to prevent dementia, but it's never too late either. There is always something we can do with these type of risk factors. I'm leading the FINGER trial, and that was the first large-scale randomized control trial to show that it is really possible to prevent cognitive decline among at-risk persons from general population. We had totally 1,260 persons. Age range was 60 to 77 years, and we selected these persons based on risk factors. We used the GAID dementia risk score, meaning that they could have, for example, high blood pressure and low physical activity, but no clear cognitive impairment yet. And the intervention, this was this multi-domain intervention, like 5 fingers: nutrition, exercise, cognitive training, social activities, and taking care of all vascular risk factors like blood pressure, cholesterol, and diabetes for 2 years. And this was compared with the so-called control group who received regular health advice. We are now ready with the 5 and 7 year in the follow-up, extended follow-up, and we are starting the 10-year follow-up after the summer. And I think it's very exciting to see what are the long-term effects. We already now have some positive news, and it seems that the healthy lifestyle is still there at least after 7 years. So when people learn the healthy lifestyle, it seems that they are able to move on even after the 2-year intervention. Here you can see a photo from the finger intervention. We used the group and individual training. Adherence was very high. We got very much positive feedback, and luckily no serious adverse events. The most common adverse event was some muscle pain after the training, which we believe is part of the intervention. You may guess or think what was the most popular of these 5 fingers in this intervention. I can tell it to you already now that actually the social component was very important. People really like to get together and do the training together. They got extra motivation and even this social stimulation at the same time. And this is, of course, more difficult to do now when we have the pandemic lockdown. So that is more challenging in this e-finger concept when we use more digital tools. I got often questions, what is the best diet for the brain? What did we use in the finger was so-called Nordic healthy diet, is similar type like the Mediterranean diet. So it was really not focusing on single nutrients, but it was more the dietary pattern that was on focus, trying to increase the fish, fruit, vegetables, unsaturated fatty acids, again, increasing the positive things and trying to decrease the unhealthy things. And people were really able to do these lifestyle changes when they got support and guidance. They need to have a more practical hands-on expertise. That was our lesson learned. These are the main results for the cognition in the finger trial. These have been already published 2015. And I think it was very nice to see the positive findings for all cognitive domains. And this is especially when we know how difficult it has been to get positive findings in randomized controlled trials, if we are thinking also the negative drug trials which have been there during the last years. So global cognition was improving, 25% more improvement in the intervention group, and all cognitive subdomains, executive function, how we are doing different planning or multitasking, 83% more improvement in the intervention group. Processing speed, how quickly we can do different things, 150% more improvement, and even memory, 40% more improvement. We have some positive news when it comes to the interactions between genetic factors and lifestyle factors. APOE4 carriers, which is the most important genetic risk factor for dementia, APOE4 carriers seem to get a clear beneficial effect of this intervention, which is very important. We have earlier findings that APOE4 carriers may be more vulnerable for unhealthy lifestyle factors, and now we can show the opposite, that you can do something. You really can reduce the risk if you do this multi-domain intervention. More recently, we were able to show that this finger multi-domain intervention is counteracting shortening of the telomeres, again, especially among the APOE4 carriers. And as you may know, telomere length is the kind of sign of cellular aging. So I think it's fascinating to see that we can measure the effect or the consequence of this intervention also on the cellular level. And it seems to be more general aging-related mechanisms. We are just now working with other genetic factors, GWAS, polygenic risk score, to see if we can see similar kind of findings there. On top of the clear effects on cognition, we could see several other beneficial effects for the finger intervention. 30% lower risk of functional decline and improvement in mobility, very important outcomes for older people for independent life. Also better health-related quality of life. And quite strikingly, we could see 60% lower risk of other chronic diseases, especially multimorbidity, developing 3 or more other chronic diseases during these 2 years. This kind of clearly shows that behind many chronic diseases are partly shared risk factors. Linked to that, there was lower risk of hospitalization and also clear health economic benefits if we would be able to keep this intervention up and running under several years. So same intervention can have brain effects for the body on individual level, but it may also have wider effects for the whole society. So FINGER has been getting a lot of interest globally, and to support this, we launched the Worldwide FINGERs Network 2017 to really help new countries to test, optimize, and adopt the FINGER model in different settings and in different cultures. Again, one size does not fit all. We really need to do this local adaptation. It was also important to try to harmonize the research methods. This has been lacking a lot, especially when it comes to lifestyle factors, how we are identifying the exposure, how we are measuring the effects. So that is really the key component in Worldwide FINGERs, having this prospective harmonization and sharing experiences and trying to do the joint analysis that we really can learn what is the best way to prevent dementia globally. And I'm very happy that now, 2021, we are having 40 countries on all continents who are part of the Worldwide FINGERs Network. You can see here with dark blue, the countries who have active trials ongoing, and with the lighter blue, countries where it is in the planning phase. And we are learning so much. You can think interventions in Asia or in India, what kind of lifestyle factors or physical activity or diet is there. So this is really, really wonderful opportunity to learn in the large scale, what is the best way to move on and reduce the risk of dementia. Of course, COVID has been causing delays for many of the trials because it came middle of the intervention in some studies, and in other countries they needed to postpone the intervention. So we have been focusing a lot how to handle these methodological challenges related to COVID-19. And if you are interested, you can read more about that in this paper, which I have listed here. We have been also interested to understand how the pandemic has been affecting the brain health. It can affect it directly, but also indirectly because of this less easy access to the healthcare and because of the lockdown effects. And here we have been working with WHO, with the Neurology and COVID-19 Global Forum. We developed a survey to try to understand these effects on the brain health. And now it's around 30 countries from Worldwide FINGERs Network who are participating in this survey. Here you can see just some results from FINGER from Finland, what it comes, how the COVID pandemic has impacted the lifestyle and behavioral factors for older adults. And as you can see, already after the first wave, there was a clear decrease in physical activity. Actually, 34 reported decrease in physical activity, more feelings of loneliness, and people felt that the memory had been getting worse. Also, a lot of cancellations in dental healthcare, home aid, and rehabilitation services, they were very common. So it's very important to get these numbers from different countries, and also if the situation is more long-lasting, it may have clear negative effects on the brain. On the positive side, many people were able to keep up digital tools to keep contact with family and friends, which gives to us new opportunities to use these type of services. And many were also able to keep up healthy eating habits. So this is really leading us where we are now in the worldwide fingers. We try to develop the concept e-fingerprint. Can we use new technology to facilitate personalized, effective, and feasible interventions and implementations? Apps, iPads, wearables, and so on. And we are just starting now at Imperial College London, where I work part-time, this e-fingerprint pilot after the summer to test these kind of tools and support in the interventions. Very, very exciting. The final concept which I want to present to you is Finger 2.0. What do I mean with Finger 2.0 is the combination, combining lifestyle and pharmacological interventions to get even better effect. So for the future, I really think it's not lifestyle or drugs, but we should combine to get even better effect. And we do have already the first results for this kind of combination. We have been conducting the MIND-AD pilot study, moving from at-risk persons for patients who had early Alzheimer's disease and some vascular and lifestyle risk factors to see how we can adapt the finger model there. And in one arm, we combined finger lifestyle with medical food, which was omega-3 based with different nutrients, supporting the synaptic plasticity. And that combination seemed to work quite well. We are just now analyzing the feasibility results, but here you can see some participants' experiences from the MIND-AD. MIND-AD gave structure to a chaotic time after the diagnosis. I felt that I can still do many things. My brain is not too damaged yet. We have become friends who are training together, and I'm part of research. And the compliance data we are now ready from Sweden is really good. Cognitive training and physical activity, 70% attendance. So it's possible to do this even when people are having cognitive impairment. And here I think the social component was maybe even more important compared to the finger targeting at-risk persons. So very, very positive news. And this has been giving to us the signal to move on and do even more kind of pharmacological combination, combining finger model with the drug. And I'm very happy that we are now in the situation that we can start the first combination trial called MedFinger. After the summer, I'm leading this from Imperial College London, and UK, Sweden, and Finland are part of this multinational study targeting around 600 at-risk persons. We are using metformin, diabetes medication metformin in this combination because we notice links between diabetes and Alzheimer. And metformin is a safe and effective drug, so it's easy to combine this with the lifestyle. And the trial will be 2 years. Here you can see the protocol for that is already finalized. And as you can see, in the group receiving this multi-domain lifestyle intervention, part of the persons will also receive metformin in different doses. And we will study these for memory and cognition, all the same outcomes we had in finger. And we are also doing brain scans and Alzheimer-related biomarkers to understand more about the mechanisms. I think this model can be then used for other, even more Alzheimer-specific drugs in the future when and if they come more widely, I would say, available. So this is really the model to the next generation of clinical trials. So to end up, this is my view where we are on the way in the dementia and Alzheimer treatment and prevention. I hope that we are moving from the complexity to more personalized medicine. And here I think the lifestyle, the finger model is always there. We may add to this cocktail also more dietary interventions and more specific Alzheimer drugs. I think there may be different Alzheimer subtypes, so different subtypes may need different ingredients to this cocktail. And ending up with the same question where we started, can Alzheimer and dementia be prevented? I would say yes. A significant portion of cases can be prevented or at least delayed, the concept risk reduction. What is good for the heart is good for the brain. I really believe so. And it's never too early and it's never too late. We can always do something. Is prevention feasible and effective? I would say yes. We have the finger model and we have some evidence there. And this model is now adapted and optimized in different settings so that it's really sustainable. We need to increase the awareness about prevention and among healthcare professionals. This is really, really important because we have enough evidence to justify some immediate actions. Prevention at the time of the COVID, I would say it's even more important. And this requires innovative approaches and really broad collaboration. And for the future, the concept precision prevention, tailoring the interventions for specific at-risk profiles and combining lifestyle and pharma and the concept e-fingers using new technology. At the end, I want to thank all my colleagues at different institutes, the whole worldwide fingers countries, and all participants and patients who have been being part of our trials, as well as all funding parties who have been supporting our studies. This is really a joint collaboration and all hands and all fingers are needed. Thank you so much for this.
Thank you very, very much for that wonderful talk, Miia. We'll, of course, have the opportunity to ask questions and Miia will provide the answers later on. But now we're going to go to our next speaker, Professor Hanne Mette, who's going to tell us a little bit more about music therapy. Thank you very much. So, Hanne.
Hello and good afternoon. I'm happy to be zoomed in from Denmark, and I will just share my screen. So I will talk about music. I guess there's a lot of finger work in music, in practicing playing the piano, but in a different way. And I have been working in as a clinician, as a music therapy clinician for more than 25 years and 20 years as a researcher. So before I talk about lockdown and COVID, I will introduce to why talking about music and also why music and dementia. So from an evolutionary perspective, we know that music is crucial for human care, attachment, for language, the coordination of movement, and also for cultural knowledge and the formation of social communities. There is some prevention, it seems, in music, and using music in different ways. For example, music listening seems to increase brain cell connectivity, musical training, finger work, better executive control and distinct perceptual and cognitive benefits. Also singing and playing music together seems to facilitate learning, also in children, and the preservation of learned material. And finally, dancing, where we have movements in a temporal context, also improves learning and memory. So music seems to decrease the risk of developing cognitive impairment and dementia. And there are many references here, but you can see from the article from 2018 of the chapter. So cognitive or cognition is so much dependent on arousal. And we know that dementia leads to arousal imbalances. So what is important if we have activities, if we want to interact with a person with dementia, we need a balanced level of arousal in order to have optimum performance. it's important for all of us, but with dementia, it's even more important. We have a lot of research on how music can be used to regulate the body. So we can describe music as sounds that are organized in time, where we have pulsation of sound waves, and they form an acoustic gestalt that had several elements of predictability. For example, in regard to tempo, that may entrain bodily rhythms. For melodic phrasing, the phrases in music often match our breathing, specifically in lullabies. And also the dynamics of music may match the expression of emotion. So we here really have gateways, different gateways to arousal regulation. And music and expression of emotion is very, very closely connected as well. We know that from film, from the whole film industry. They put a lot of money in really composing good music for films. And well, a picture like this, we can change fully how we feel when we see the picture with sounds. In the film industry, they use acousmatic sounds. This is sounds where we hear something, but we don't know what it is. We can't see it. And this makes us insecure and may even trigger anxiety. We may also have sounds that bring safety. And this is when we know the source of the sound. We know where the sound comes from. The sound is recognizable, it's meaningful. And if it's supported by more sense impressions, which is important for people with dementia, it may work as like anxiolytic music that really calms us down. So if we can see, for example, a person singing, we can see the person, we can hear it, we might feel the movements or touch. This gives more meaning to our sense impressions, which is important for people with dementia. So music connects, it provides safety, it regulates the nervous system, and it connects people. However, music can also stress us if we use, for example, acousmatic sounds. We may be stressed. We know that it regulates the nervous system up, where we become aroused, but we might exceed the balanced arousal level and really be overstimulated. Or it may be so boring that we fall asleep. Music connects people, but it certainly also disconnects people. I don't know if you ever had a neighbor who played music too loud very late in the evening. Somehow it feels that you get a bit disconnected then. So music is a powerful medium. And there are possible side effects of music interventions. For example, overstimulation, agitation, and also social isolation if you feel disconnected with the music. So we need to know what we do when we use music. Music therapy in dementia care is recommended in the Danish Health Guidelines to reduce behavioral and psychological symptoms of dementia. And here it's described that it's not the music in itself, but it's the musical actions and interactions with the goal of offering contact, communication, relationship, and thereby meeting important psychosocial needs. So it's not just about putting on some Mozart and then people will feel good. It's really about how and when and to whom we use the music. That is coming more and more research about music interventions, about music therapy. And for example, this systematic review of systematic reviews and meta-analyses show that, or describe one of the most promising treatments is music therapy for reducing agitation and BPSD. And there's a health evidence network synthesis from the World Health Organization, and where they also point at different aspects about music therapy, music, dance, that it provides a sense of security and belonging, help to reduce social isolation and PTSD, enhance the effects of reminiscence therapies, and how this immersive nature of music can lead to enhanced mindfulness and fewer intrusive thoughts. Reminiscence therapy, here there's a focus on memories from the past, but also to bring in the here and now. And one type of memories is nostalgia, that by Routledge and colleagues is described as a social emotion, and that especially serves an existential function and also strengthens social connectedness. And in a study by Ismail and colleagues, they describe music as a powerful trigger of nostalgia, and certainly very useful for people with Alzheimer's disease, where they show how music triggers self-defining memories, and that these are more specific and with more emotional content, and even retrieved faster with music than with other objects or with no music. And then furthermore, musical memories tend to be well preserved in Alzheimer's disease. And this is also supported by research, for example, by Jacobsen and colleagues, who show that musical memory regions overlap with areas that are relatively spared in Alzheimer's disease. So summing up, music seems to be a very good tool for providing safety, sustained attention via arousal regulation, and also for social connectedness. So the therapeutic goals by using music could be sharing and validating emotional and nostalgic experiences and memories through music, and hereby creating a sense of meaning and meeting psychosocial needs. Well, lockdown, and we suddenly learned that shouting and singing loudly can produce 20 times as much the mass of aerosol than speaking. Suddenly singing is, well, quite dangerous, and we saw a lot of principles of safer singing, wearing face covering, distance, and well-ventilated spaces, or only singing outside. In nursing home, we saw visits by loved one restricted, and even many places not allowed at all. And in Denmark, music therapists were sent home, so they only kept health professionals in the nursing homes. This lasted a couple of weeks, and then we saw in Denmark that music therapists were called back to work. We saw that they were increased in hours, and we have seen many new positions during this time, during lockdown, which is very interesting. We have seen these adapted services, for example, that keeping the live connection, where group sessions were then replaced by individual sessions, and also that singing and playing music were kept, but now with distance. And for example, several music therapists described how they would now sing in the hallway and have the doors open to resident room, or in other ways using space to provide music. And there have been several concerts outside in the gardens or in the yards, and also connection through one-on-one outside the window, where people would share music and playing with the accordion or the guitar. And then there have been all these online initiatives with sing-along sessions, tele sessions, and here the participants needed to mute their mics. It's impossible to sing together online. It doesn't work. So, and here also nursing home staff, they needed to connect to the individual or to the group. They also needed to help residents to join different initiatives, for example, television broadcast and streaming. It has been amazing to see during lockdown in Denmark, for example, Friday evening, best time ever for television, showing singing, that people could sit at home, sing this, like karaoke. This we have never seen before, and it has been so popular. I think whole Denmark more or less have been joining these online singing, and also people with dementia. And then, of course, the one-on-one music listening session where you listen to music. And I will give some examples afterwards. First of all, just there's this survey from US music therapists. More than 1,000 music therapists joined this one-item survey. And a third of them, of the music therapists, work in dementia care. And they described how they adapted service delivery, despite many different difficulties in doing this. And in this article and this research, they described how in skilled nursing facilities that for example, here telehealth would be used for streaming sessions very often, or often pre-recorded playlist or video sessions, or live stream music activities via social media, and also virtual music lessons, fingerwork, I guess. So I would show some examples from this from Denmark, how we used adapted music therapy. And here is one of my students who is having with the Alzheimer Association carrying out music therapy with a small group of people coming in this center. It's a small group, so for them it's possible to see each other on Zoom and to sing together with the music therapy. Of course, not together, but they can see each other. And what is also quite practical is that you can see the text. So you can share it on the screen, and you don't have to sit with your songbook. That sometimes is also very practical. We have with our students, the music therapy training in Denmark is a 5-year training. And our second-year students, they, in small groups, 2 or 3 or 4 students are in charge of our dementia choir, where quite many people with dementia and their families and friends, they come and sing along with our students. And of course that was not possible, but we then first tried online live streaming. It was so difficult technically, but now we have really good help and support from our concert hall, House of Music. So it has really been done really professionally, the last streaming sessions, and also pre-recorded. So this has been really nice. People who used to come to the House of Music can continue to sing at home as well. And I also have to add this about the music at the vaccine centers, where small groups from the Aalborg Symphony Orchestra would play live at the vaccine centers, but of course they couldn't come and be there all day. So some of my colleagues have produced playlists. So music was played all day at the centers. And of course, for most of us, we might not even notice that there's music. But for some people, it's my hypothesis, it might decrease confusion, and also might make it easier to wait in the queue first, and then also after the vaccine you have to sit waiting for some time. So for some with mild cognitive impairment, this might be a good thing to do. We are collecting data on this, but still haven't finished it. And then there are the online music therapy sessions. We are doing a project right now with the guided imagery and music. It's where you listen to music, and we do it with people with early stage dementia who are still living at home. And here you see John, who's lying on his sofa with the earphones. So first, in the first part of the session, he's sitting here at the chair and we're talking. Here's his computer, and this is my computer at home, or the music therapist's computer. And then we talk about how he's doing and if he has some special needs today. And then the music therapist would select special music for him. And he will lie down, and during listening to music, he would also tell what is happening, if he has certain images, certain feelings or experiences this is difficult also online, because when you speak, the sound will increase. So there's a problem with the quality of the music. But actually it has improved with the quality. And so it is possible really to enjoy the music in this way. And for example, John, he had 12 sessions, a meeting with him, and now had 5 sessions on Zoom. So trying this out and also collecting data. Of course, this is only one person, but there was really, it continued to be really, really effective for him, and also with a significant increase in cognition and in well-being. And also during the online session, which is very interesting, and I would not have thought that So of course we need to rethink how we can do music therapy. I think it's important to meet first, but then if we can replace sessions and do them online, also with good results, we really have to consider this as well. There are disadvantages using adapted services. Live sessions with the distance and the reduction of group sessions, we might see more social isolation. It is important to sing, sit close, holding hand or dancing. We can do that again now, but during lockdown, I think that increased social isolation as well. And the online sessions and the telesinging, we don't have this mutual bodily synchronization with the therapist and the participants, and this attuned micro-regulation that we don't have with the screen. For some people with maybe more severe dementia, the music might be received as acousmatic sounds. You don't know what is happening. Some voice is coming out from the computer. You can't see the person, or you hear music coming from it. It's not understandable for the person. It might have some disadvantages for the person. And we might see also overstimulation if we just put on music and don't observe the person, how are they reacting, and forget to turn out the music again. If somehow they stay too long with the music. So there might be several disadvantages with these adapted services. Dawson and Snyder from the UK have done this scoping review on online singing groups for people with dementia, where they looked at all the experiences with online singing, and they only found one study, a Japanese study from 2014. They used individual music therapy via Skype and played CDs with personalized music. There were only 3 persons with dementia in the study. So of course we can't say so much here. There's not much evidence, but they have some very interesting highlights from this study. They discuss the logistical issues and how this can promote or inhibit online singing. And they see an evidence of growing acceptability of digital interventions. And this is largely from telemedicine literature, but also efficacy from remotely delivered music therapy, and also the use of apps, different ways of using the music. This increased online provision could also improve accessibility. People from the remote areas, or where it's not possible to come with the bus or anything, or where relatives would have to bring the person. And they describe or discuss that a key scaling up on online singing groups, we really need improved software to overcome the audio latency. It would be wonderful if it would be possible to be in tune, to sing together, and not to mute the mics. But also to tackling digital exclusion among certain groups in society. So in conclusion, overall music is a social practice, and it makes it difficult to share this practice online. However, in spite of technical challenges, there are many advantages with online sessions. And we see new telehealth solution. There will come new solution, and it will continue to be used, I'm sure, and it will continue to develop. So thank you for listening. And there's a lot of references that I'm happy to share with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this very interesting talk on neonatal therapy and its effects on dementia. And now we have our roundtable session where we will be, I'll be reading up some of the Q&As and questions that we have here, and I hope our panelists will be able to answer most of them. And following that, we'll also have the opportunity, of course, for people to ask the questions themselves. So the first question I have here is a question for ARUK. It asks whether, is there a merit in following the example of the cancer research charities and merging with the Alzheimer's Society, thereby gaining economies of scale? So is there a merit in that at all, Hilary?
So thanks for your question. I would say in the dementia space, there are very few charities. So in the UK, there are hundreds and hundreds of cancer charities and cancer research charities. There was a big merger between two cancer research charities. In the dementia space, Alzheimer's Society are primarily a care and support organisation. So they do have some funding rounds, but it's about 6-7% of their overall charitable spend. Alzheimer's Research UK are purely a research organisation, and we only fund biomedical research. So I would say there is very little overlap between the organisations. We work quite closely on a few projects, and we're aligned in terms of our information to the public, but we have very different charitable aims, and therefore I don't think a merger in this space would make any sense. If anything, we need more organisations and more focus when it comes to dementia research, rather than one organisation trying to spread themselves too thinly. And I think we've seen in other areas that that doesn't necessarily deliver for research and for science funding, but it also doesn't necessarily deliver in terms of offering the public different organisations that they can support, and ensuring that ultimately the kind of pieces and size of the bigger cake that we want to be able to generate for dementia as a whole that delivers for people is as effective. So I don't think we would be in that place for dementia charities. I think you're on mute, Selma. Sorry.
Okay. Thank you very much for that, Hilary. So there's a number of questions here. I'm going to go to a question regarding Miia. So there's a question here. In the MET finger trial, do all participants have diabetes? How are the doses selected? Thank you.
Thank you. So MET finger trial, these persons have more kind of metabolic syndrome, not full diabetes yet. It's quite similar what we had in finger, meaning that they could have obesity, high blood pressure, high lipids. So it's more close to the metabolic syndrome or pre-diabetes, but not full diabetes yet. So this is more to prevent the diabetes. So that's the idea. And we also are using the ApoE for enrichment. I did not mention that so specifically, and that comes from the finger findings, which I showed that ApoE for carriers seem to get the extra clear benefits. So they have at least 50% will have ApoE4, and then they have more the metabolic syndrome features. Cognition at mean level, like in the finger.
Thank you very much. Now we have a question, I think, for Hanne Mette, and saying, I'm a student working with the memory assessment team in the community. We are restarting cognitive stimulation therapy again next week with a reduced capacity due to social distancing rules. Part of the therapy includes music therapy. However, we've been told that we are not able to sing, only to hum along to the songs. Do you feel this would still be as beneficial?
Interesting. I guess so. Humming is also very special. It's very calming if you hum together. I don't know. I have never had any humming groups, but that is very interesting. And sure, you should do it. And it's also a way of sharing music. Yeah. And good luck.
All right. Then we have some further questions here. Someone thanking Helen, thanking the panel for their presentations, and saying, are you able to advise on the healthy diet for a vegetarian or vegan diet? What could replace the fish element? So, Miia, do you have anything for us to say about that?
I could start, and maybe others have also wise comments. I mean, the diet part is really tricky because there are also so many special diets, and also I'm thinking globally, this is maybe one of the fingers where we really are thinking that what is the best advice for the health. I think vegetarian and vegan, there are so many of these good components for the brain health, as I mentioned, which are important, a lot of antioxidants, vitamins, fiber, and so on. So I think that's a great basis for the brain health and all the planetary health diet, like reducing the amount of meat. So good of many good things. I think what we need to be maybe a bit mindful is at least the vitamin B12, which is mainly coming from the animal products. So somehow also for older people, the absorption of the vitamin B12 may get less. So this is one vitamin where I think it's good to be mindful and maybe take a supplement if needed. Fish, I mean, that's an interesting thing. How important is the fish part if you eat otherwise, like in a healthy way? And that's a little bit where we are now moving, not only focusing on single nutrients, but it's more the dietary pattern. So I think there are ways to get these healthy fatty acids, which are important for the brain. There would be tofu and maybe soya products. There are a lot of new products which are mimicking the fish as well. Can you take omega-3 capsules? It has been not evidence-based in the way, but I think it's more the balance to see how you can get enough proteins from different sources that you have all the essential fatty acids for the body and the brain. And also what age range we are thinking. Are you older or younger people? So the needs may be a little bit different. I sometimes recommend my patients, if they have very strict diet, to ask the dietitian to really get more advice if there would be lack of some specific nutrients and vitamins.
Thank you very much. Yeah, there's another question here to you from Professor Anne-Marie Meerheim. And she's asking, in the prevention sphere, we always have the argument that our interventions are expensive to deliver. But of course, the long-term cost saving for dementia prevention or delay are huge. Did FINGER conduct a health-economic/cost benefit analysis?
That's a great question again, and yes, we did. And that paper, I'm working with health economists, Anders Vimo, Martin Knapp from UK, and we are just finalizing our paper focusing on the health economic aspects. And I can already tell you that the results are really positive, not only neutral, but real cost savings if we could run the FINGER type of intervention on the longer term. So on the societal point of view, absolutely cost savings if we could run this kind of program. And we did not even take into account the effect for the cardiovascular health. So I guess if we could take that as well, that could be even more cost saving. So it does not need to be so expensive. And again, the question is how much you want to do, what type of support. If we can even use more the digital tools which we heard about, I think we could do it even more kind of feasible. So the cost of the intervention in the finger was not actually so high. And of course, if you compare for the drug cost, everything we can do to at least delay the onset, I think it's on individual and societal level a really great way. Happy to share the paper when it's out.
Thank you very much, Miia. Thank you. There's a question here to all speakers. How can local authorities use findings of research when commissioning services and developing training for its staff, for example, OTs and social workers? Hilary, can you hear me?
Yeah, hi. Yeah, so I guess that's probably just sort of outside of on sort of normal area of work. So obviously we're not a charity that funds care research, but I would say as more and more research comes through that in terms of things that are going to be beneficial for people living with dementia, it's really key that care providers and local authorities can keep up to date with some of the latest guidance. And I would say, there is a huge amount of information now coming through on best practice. And I know a number of organisations who are working really hard to try and translate that research progress to be useful to those who are delivering services on the ground. I would say that the charities play a key role here. But there's also some fantastic sort of portals to understand some of the latest academic discoveries coming through. But I think for all of us working in medical research, being able to translate what it is that we're doing into practical guidance for those who are delivering support and care is really key.
Thank you very much. Anybody else wants to chip in on with further comments to this question? Yes, Hanne.
We have a study right now about for caregivers. They might know it's good to sing, and they might understand it, but to do it might be very difficult. So many people feel that they're not able to sing, are afraid of singing. So here, I think we need some extra. We need to join them, to be with them, to teach, but also to have to be in practice together with a music therapist, somehow to break these barriers about using songs and music. They need to see how it works before they can do it. So having a lot of papers and words in our heads, it's not enough. We also need to do it together with somebody. So it's a culture we also need to change.
I also see this as a big need to educate. I mean, it's really multidisciplinary work if I'm thinking the patient with dementia and also the different stages. When you have the early diagnosis, when it's more advanced, there are different needs and you may need to adapt it. So both the healthcare workers and family members, caregivers. So I think the education is so important, and all these non-pharmacological interventions which are available, we have them. It's more how to do that. So I think that's really the key. We are just now working with the finger implementation at the primary care, how we can go from this randomized controlled trial to real life intervention. It has been so interesting to hear the comments and seeing what are the facilitators and barriers. Maybe there are some groups who need extra support, and how can we really reach all, not only those who have easier to get them or understand or adapt their lifestyle or other interventions. So I think we need to work at the same time with the research, but also try to implement. Normally it takes 10 to 15 years to implement scientific findings, and I think it's too long time what it comes at least to these more easily available non-pharmacological interventions. So I was inspired for the music therapy, and I think that should be the 6 fingers. So we are using it already, but we could absolutely use it much, much more.
Yes, fantastic. Talking about music, so Carol Simpson here is asking, a lady with dementia who's enjoying singing but hasn't been able to due to COVID is now worried about forgetting the words of the songs when she joins her singing group again. Any suggestions to support her? Any advice for that?
The funny thing about singing is that it's really knowing all the song text, it's procedural memory. So when you ask a person, they might not at all remember the text. But as they sing and they sing along, all the text is coming. And even people with dementia who have no language anymore, I see so often that they know the words. But you need the right triggers, and you also need to be at a balanced arousal level. If you are somehow too focused on remembering, everything will be forgotten. So it's very specific about memory and how we trigger memories that we need to know about people with dementia. Also with reminiscence therapy, that we don't somehow ask and try to pull out the memories, but somehow find ways of memory coming up by finding the right triggers. So I guess it's not her problem, it should be the problem of the people who are organizing such singing groups, that they find a way of that it's not necessary to remember the songs, it will come then.
Right. Thank you very much. There's another question here, asking, Hilary mentioned Alzheimer's Society focusing on a different area of her charity, thinking of health and social care and lifestyle changes Miia talked about. Do people feel the initiative should be health or social care led or joint? Hilary, what do you think?
So I assume by initiative we're talking about maybe the sort of earlier question around sort of local authorities delivering on some of the latest research findings. But I would say that if we're talking about health or social care, it certainly should be joint. If we're talking about what people can do to reduce their risk of dementia, then it needs to essentially be everyone. So this needs to be a message that gets to the whole population. So we need this to be something that everyone has a responsibility around. So this is, primary health care, this is social care. But actually, when we're talking about prevention, and we're often talking about people in midlife who maybe don't have huge interactions with a health or social care system. So I think then we're talking about the media, we're talking about campaigns. There's then a role for a number of charities in this space, as well as public health bodies. But I do think that, and I know Alzheimer's Society have been doing quite a bit of work around how we are translating good practice in terms of some of the latest research into health and care and delivering good care to people living with dementia and improving care and working through their networks to do that. So I think some of this is happening, but I think there is a bit of a shift in terms of recognition and understanding around risk reduction and how we deliver those messages. But I think it needs to, again, I think Miia mentioned it before, but it has to be multifaceted. It has to be something as a society, just as with smoking campaigns or links with healthy lifestyles and heart disease. Actually, these have been campaigns that have run through society, and I think that's what we need to see here.
I agree. Anybody else wants to address this question?
I got just that I fully agree, and in a way it's always the question, if I'm thinking more the prevention and risk reduction, who takes the responsibility? And it's clearly so complex that it's joint. We all need to do, and we all can do something. Each individual can do something. I mean, even small steps is important. The whole life course, but it's also the health policies. How can we talk about dementia-friendly society. I normally say, I also would like to have a kind of dementia prevention-friendly society that is easy to be out, take walks, even for older people, you know, go to the gyms and the healthy diet. In some societies now, when we are working with worldwide fingers, so it can be that healthy food is more expensive. Not all people have access to the information. So I think there are a lot of things also at the policy level that could be there. So really we need to be ambitious with the risk reduction.
Indeed. So we have a question here from David Ross, saying that having spent the last 15 months researching why my wife contracted FTD and was in care for 18 months after diagnosis, I agree with everything you say, but is the general public aware? I wasn't. I believe the seeds of her FTD started 31 years earlier. What do you think about that? So in terms of very early diagnosis questions. Hilary, any comments on that?
I think that's a really good point. Quite a bit of the public campaigning work we've done as an organisation in recent years has been focused around the fact that dementia is caused by disease. And so actually just taking it right back to the sort of basics, I guess, around dementia to try and educate the public to understand what these diseases are and what some of the symptoms are, and the fact that this isn't just aging, this doesn't just happen when you get older. And there is still stigma around some of these diseases and how people talk about them. But there's a real lack of understanding, I think, out there. And it's our role as a charity to be raising awareness and to be able to support and educate and raise awareness around what happens to someone's brain when they have dementia. And we know that the seeds of some of these diseases start much, much earlier, just like other diseases. But I think when it comes to the brain, there's obviously still a lot that we want to be able to discover and to be able to solve. But I think when it comes to the public, there's still a lot of maybe sort of misinformation, but just a lack of general awareness as to some of these diseases. So that's something that we've been working quite hard on, and are likely to focus on even more over the next couple of years, as early detection, as I mentioned at the beginning of this meeting, is going to become even more important in terms of how we diagnose these diseases, but how we can support people in some of the earlier stages, as well as being able to find more effective treatments. But I think that starting from the point that these are diseases, dementia doesn't just happen as you get older. This is not just an inevitability. These are diseases that we will be able to do something about. We are understanding a lot more about them, and therefore we'll be better at treating and reducing our risk, and preventing and slowing down is a really positive message. But again, as one organisation can't just get these messages out. We need this to be a societal campaign, and ultimately we need as much of our funding to go towards research. So we need the support of sort of a lot of others in society, so the media or the companies, to come behind us on some of this messaging, just like we've seen in maybe cancer, where there's been a huge boost in terms of understanding of the importance of detecting cancer earlier and what happens in the body when someone's maybe developing cancer. The shift in 20 years, 30 years in cancer have been huge, and I'm hoping that certainly we can do it faster in dementia, but the next 10 years we'll see a real shift in terms of the public's perception of these diseases.
Thank you very much, Hilary. Anyone else would like to chip in on early detection?
Yeah, fully agree. And I was also thinking that the understanding that dementia is a brain disorder, and also different types of dementia. Of course, we have been focusing so much on Alzheimer, which is the most common, but also I'm thinking frontotemporal dementia, Lewy body dementia, which may have more other type of symptoms, like the behavioral symptoms, which may not be even less people have even less understanding that can also be the kind of dementia disorder, which may delay the diagnosis even further. So I think giving more information about all dementias and the variety of the symptoms, of course, memory and cognition is there, but also these behavioral symptoms are common. So that I think is so important to train the GPs and other healthcare organizations at the public. What are the typical symptoms and also different types of dementia? I'm also thinking prevention. We do still know very little about possibilities to reduce the risk for these more rare dementia forms, because again, dementia as a syndrome and Alzheimer has been the focus. So we have there so much to do as well.
I would also just say one of the most powerful ways of getting these messages across is for people to talk about their own personal stories. So people who are living with dementia and their families and their carers to talk about how you may have then seen changes in your partner's behavior, or actually when you have started to suddenly think back and actually, yes, this disease has been with us for a lot longer than our diagnosis, and to, you know, it's probably one of the most powerful ways that we can get some of those messages across. So we're very grateful for people who support us and come forward to tell those stories as well.
We have another question here. In light of one person being diagnosed with dementia every 3 seconds, what are your thoughts on engaging with more people who are living and or have been newly diagnosed? What are some of the methods that should be used to do this?
Wow, it's a great question. I mean, this is, and I think also we want to engage, we need to engage the patients and those persons who have the risk of getting dementia. That's what we do more and more in our studies. I mentioned our e-finger and met-finger studies. So we are having a panel of participants. We want to hear what is the kind of how should we discuss about prevention, risk reduction, what kind of preventive tools are there, and also engage really the persons there. So that is a huge opportunity we have to do that. I think there as well, the digital tools could be available to really try to reach wider audience. That's something we work now in UK as well at Imperial College with this e-fingerprint idea to have more kind of online register where we could engage wider audience. I think that's so crucial. And also the digital tools, we can't do it without the participants, because we need to know that it really works and people want to use them also for the longer time.
Hanne, Mette, do you think there's an angle here for music therapy on this?
There really, I think engagement is so important, that you are engaged in what you're doing. When you're doing physical work or something, if you really put on the right music and are engaged, this is so helpful. So I think if people are somehow supported in finding ways where they can be engaged in various activities, also to eat the right food, I think you need support in different ways to be engaged. And it's a lot of responsibility to have a diagnosis. It's not just to have a label and then you can sit down and say, oh, I have dementia. But for some, it's really a wake-up call. But of course, you have to be engaged and find ways of being engaged. And I think music could be one way of doing that, if you're interested in music. For others, it would be football or other things.
Yes, great. And Hilary, I'm sure you're engaged in a number of methods for these aspects as well. Do you have any comments? Hilary?
Sorry, just unmuting myself. Yeah, I think absolutely. I think there's a even greater need for people at the point of diagnosis to get all of the right information and support that they need. I think there should also be an offer at the point of diagnosis to take part in research, because that isn't something that happens in dementia as it does routinely with other diagnoses and other disease areas. And I think increasingly that's something that everyone at the point of diagnosis wants to know. How can I be in part of clinical trials? What are the hopes in research? How can their diagnosis maybe help people in the future, or actually help help potentially their own diagnosis. So I think that's something we'd want to see ensure that's in a sort of care pathway. But I think that a diagnosis of dementia, it should be one that is done with the right care and support. And I think that doesn't always happen. People need information about what is going to help them in the coming years, but also what the sort of long term looks like and what a research offering looks like. Because I think that's, again, something that can be really positive for people in the early stages of diagnosis.
Thank you. We've got another question here. Do people feel that those with dementia were unfairly disadvantaged during COVID? Because those with dementia tend to be older, who have increased isolation already with digital exclusion, etc. From COVID, does the panel feel there are things to be learned? Many people I have had contact with say their relatives got worse during COVID due to isolation.
I completely agree. I don't think you could possibly disagree with that statement. I think it's been an incredibly tough time for older people who've had to maybe shield, or particularly for people with dementia. Obviously, particularly people in care settings and care homes have had an awful time where they've lost their lives, or they've lost the lives of people around them in huge numbers. They've not been able to see friends or family. They've had very little contact with the outside world. And, I think this is one of the really awful things about the last couple of years. I think that we do need to think of, as a society, how we treat older people. I think intrinsically society can be quite ageist. I think there are certainly lessons to be learned in terms of some of the ways that people with dementia and older people were maybe prioritised or treated. I think that this is why there needs to be a renewed effort to ensure that we are giving people with dementia the right support over the next couple of years. We know that dementia diagnoses are lagging way behind where they should be, and people who maybe are living at home have not had the right kind of support. They haven't had social interaction. They haven't had the support and sort of informal care from family and friends. They maybe rely on the TV for company, but maybe aren't as au fait with sort of digital technologies and don't necessarily have smartphones and iPads and laptops to be able to be interacting with the outside world. So I do think it's an incredibly tough time.
Indeed, it has. Anybody else would like to comment on this?
Fully agree. I mean, we have seen that clearly that the diagnoses have been delayed and postponed. We have had more patients coming with behavioral symptoms, sometimes confusion to the hospital because the diagnoses have been delayed. The medication has been not always working well. Daycares have been sometimes closed. It's a lot of stress for the families. And this whole thing with the quarantine for patients with cognitive problems has not been easy. A lot of frustration and anxiety. And I also mentioned these unhealthy lifestyle factors like cancellations in dental care, other things. So there are also the risk that there will be even more long-term negative effects. So I think we need to be prepared better for the next challenges and do everything we can do now to minimize these negative long-term effects.
Okay, thank you. Hanne, Mette?
I fully agree. It really, really has been so terrible to see what happened to people with dementia during lockdown. And I think, we had to learn what happened, and also how, of course, there were many things we didn't know about, that there's this relationship between COVID and dementia, and so we could have spared life if we, and we could have increased quality of life if we had known more. So we surely have to be prepared if something should happen again like this.
All right. Thank you. And of course, this is my own question here. I'm just thinking about long COVID. So long COVID, of course, has a detrimental effect on the brain. And there's presumably, of course, an increased likelihood of leading to dementia-like symptoms in the future. I wonder if any of you have sort of some suggestions regarding, for example, the finger intervention or something to reduce the effects of long COVID.
I mean, this is so interesting area, and I said we do not yet know enough maybe what is really the long COVID. There was this one of several papers, but one very nice paper from UK, this 6 months follow-up showing that COVID could also increase the risk of both stroke, but even dementia, even though the follow-up time was quite short. We are just working with WHO, working with the systematic review, seeing what evidence is out there, how much we can say now about the possible long-term effects for cognition and even the risk of dementia. What are the mechanisms? So I think there are still many question marks which we do not know. What are the mechanisms? We are seeing some effects for the inflammation, the vascular lesions, that there may be a real things happening in the brain, or the neurotoxic effect of the virus. So there are mediating pathways, and how much we can do for that. How can we rehabilitate if there have been COVID are important questions. I believe that we could do a lot with finger type of intervention for the other effects, like if we can improve the taking care of other risk factors, physical activity, social part, I think then we can reduce the factors we can affect. So somehow, as I mentioned, it feels that this type of focus on brain health risk factors is even more important for all, I would say, in this new post-COVID landscape.
Thank you very much. I'm wondering, Hanne, Mette, I think even music might help people with long COVID effects. Have you embarked on a study like this, or is this something that you plan to do?
This study we are doing with this special kind of music listening, the GIM study, the way participant describe it, the example, John, he described music as something that boosts his brain. He really sometimes he just needs to, if he has to go somewhere, he knows I need to just have a rest, and then he puts on certain music and he feels like it's a booster for him. I don't know if everybody would have the same way of learning to use music as a way of being able to cope and also to stimulate the brain. But we should know more about that. But I'm not sure everybody could do this, have this way of using music. But for those who can, it's such an important tool that they just have to, it's just lying there. You can just use it. It's nothing very special. Yeah, it's very cheap and easy.
Indeed. And Hilary, you must have also come across a lot of initiatives trying to address the issue of long COVID and its coupling to dementia as well. I wonder, what are you doing in the ARUK sphere to address this problem?
Yeah, so I think, as others have mentioned, that this is an area where there are sort of in the early stage, I guess, of a number of research papers and scientists who are now looking at COVID and dementia and long COVID and dementia. So we will certainly know more in the coming months and years. And I think it's something that will be interesting for all of us to be very aware of. I think that certainly in the short term, there needs to be a real focus on support and well-being for people who are recovering and living with long COVID, and especially people who may be more at risk of dementia or are living with dementia. So I think that's been a big focus for us. I think there's also a piece around stepping up to the challenge that's ahead of us and delivering on what we're all here to do in terms of improving the lives of people with dementia, as well as ensuring that we can deliver more through dementia research, and particularly owe it to people who've lived through this and who are suffering from long COVID to understand more about what some of the interventions that might help. But I think that this has certainly been an eye-opener to maybe our health systems in terms of how we would deal with this kind of health crisis and then what the implications are for the vast number of people who are living with dementia, which is only then going to go up. So I think that it does hopefully provide some impetus, and certainly we're campaigning very hard here in trying to get the government and NHS England to really stand up and wake up to the needs of people with dementia.
Thank you very much. I don't have any new questions coming in, so I think we can shortly close this session. So I'd like to thank you all very much, all the attendees and our panelists for the wonderful talks. And we will hopefully remain connected in the future, trying to address all these issues. And through all the paradigms actually that have been discussed today, I think a synchronized approach to all of this might actually deliver something rather impactful in the future. So thank you very much, everyone, and I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did. All right. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.